Hello and welcome to another Times Radio Members Question and Answer. Now today we're answering comments from our channel members on Frontline episodes and other videos about the war in Ukraine and its impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram. I'm one of the presenters of Times Radio Frontline, but I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer and global commentator on all matters defence, war, counter-terrorism, cyber and anything else that people ask me to talk about. I've got a few points today and a few questions that we'll get onto. First one comes from Vaser Blitz EU. It's always good to know your names. So if you put them in, you put that in, and it doesn't matter if you make it up, but at least it can address you rather than by some of your handles. And you say, isn't it obvious that the era of tank warfare is over? This is the age of satellite intel, APCs for troop transportation, an abundance of highly skilled drone operators, drones in all sorts and forms, be it surface, naval or aerial, and solid strategists. Artillery missiles in all sorts of forms are still a thing too, and submarines were applicable. But tanks and traditional naval vessels, not so. That's a very, very good question and good point. And it's always dangerous to learn lessons from the latest conflict and what you're seeing and how that's playing out. Armoured vehicles, whether they be tanks or armoured personnel carriers, are needed on the battlefield. The Ukrainians have not been able to use armoured vehicles in the way that you would expect them to be used from a NATO-type operation. And where I'm coming from with that is that you get what's called an all-arms battle group. And that all-arms battle group has got its armoured infantry, its armoured forces, its tanks, armoured engineer capability, supported by armoured artillery to give you that depth fire and everything else, and be able to take that armoured package in through a highly defended area and to have an effect. Now, drones have brought in a new threat to armoured vehicles and to soft-skinned vehicles and to personnel, as we see from the videos. The bit that is missing that would ordinarily come in is being able to guarantee local air superiority. So there's no point in putting that armoured force in unless you can guarantee air superiority. And that air superiority beforehand was stopping fixed-wing aircraft and rotary-wing aircraft from impacting your armoured package. We've now just got a new weapon system, and that new weapon system is the drones, the FPV drones, the loitering munitions. And we knew loitering munitions were coming along, but the development of the counter to those loitering munitions had not progressed in the same way. So the tanks, the APCs and all the rest have been around a long time. The Ukrainians, whenever they first got the UK's Challenger 2 tanks, US M1 Abrams, the Leopard 2 tanks from Germany and from elsewhere, tried a counter-offensive with armoured punch, but they didn't have that full package, and they couldn't manoeuvre that full package, and they lost a number of their tanks. Most of them were damaged by what are called M kills, mobility kills, so that the tank could manoeuvre. But the crew survived, and the crew managed to abandon them and get back to fight another day. That shows the value of them. If you fight a tank the way it's supposed to be fought as part of a wider package, and you've got all of the elements to a package, tanks are still the best anti-tank device that you've got out there and fighting in a protective battle. So it's by no means the end of the tank. But I think what Ukraine is showing very clearly is that you have to have that complete package. And I think in the UK, certainly, but other countries are very quickly recognising that the integral air defence capability that's needed to provide a layered system. The higher levels are provided by fixed-wing aircraft. The next layer is provided by anti-aircraft missiles. And then there needs to be a layer of guns and everything else to deal with the threats that are coming at you from different levels. The complexity of modern warfare has just got one step, or maybe 50 steps, more complex. But a good point. Next point comes from Lars Bukrin, 1740. And you say, importance of drones is probably difficult to grasp as the Air Force has been weak on both sides for various reasons. Perhaps no drone development is a function of the lack of close air support. We saw that Blackweather wants to buy into Ukrainian drone know-how, a frightening development in that case. Well, the one country in the world that has got most drone experience in combat, I would say, is Ukraine. The country that's got the second most knowledge in drone combat is probably Russia. And it's very obvious that they're learning from each other very quickly. We saw the Ukrainians develop their FPV drones and adaptations from commercial off-the-shelf hobbyist drones through to now what they're manufacturing in bulk themselves that range from that hobbyist size of drone right up to some very large drones that can have different effects. And the method of controlling those drones has changed from it being radio controlled to being fiber optic controlled. And that's something that the Russians have picked up very quickly on and are exploiting that. So drone technology has advanced very, very rapidly indeed. And in the West, we are playing catch up. And this is why Ukrainian knowledge is being applied back into the West. And I know for a fact that there are Ukrainian military personnel helping to train British military personnel in Salisbury Plain training area on the use of drones in the battle space. And there's a Ukrainian drone company is just opening a factory in the UK to help them produce drones. There are also UK drone manufacturers who have rapidly developed capabilities to send to Ukraine. But in warfare, weapons technology always develops, and the innovation that's there in the countries and the sides that can keep that innovation going and be one step ahead of the adversary or the side that is going to do better and potentially win. When it comes to drones, Ukraine is leading the battle at the moment, but the Russians aren't far behind. But again, a very good point. And it is something that is going to change the nature of the modern battle space and something we have to be cognizant of. Dark Elder, next point from you. Welcome back. And you say how draining it must be for the morale of Russian troops. They move forward to take a settlement, and after a few days that settlement is more than likely back under the control of Ukraine, time and again. And still they continue with that same failing tactic. I see no gain for them on the operational level either. Ukraine now damaged or took out about a fifth to a quarter of Russian refining capabilities. It's massive. Sure, Putin can ration the remaining 75% to prioritise the army and Moscow for much longer, while the rest of Russia's waiting in the lines for their tens of litres of gasoline/diesel. Adding the banking crisis in Russia, they will continue for months, even if that squeezes the last bit out of Russia before Putin has no choice but to call for a ceasefire himself. Well, you have been listening to some of the things that I've been saying, and you've got that good understanding of the operational level and the tactical level. And you're right. At a tactical level, we're effectively on stalemate. Russia takes 100 meters here. Ukraine takes 100 meters there. Russian troops stop because they haven't got the wherewithal to advance forward and to exploit any opportunities where they might have broken through the front lines. And the Ukrainians then cut any breakthroughs up and push the Russian troops back, and they make a small breakthrough themselves. This conflict is not going to be won at the tactical level. It could be lost by the Ukrainians if their defences capitulate and Russia has got the ability to push forward. But I think we're beyond that. And you're quite right, hitting that operational level. And the fuel rationing that you're talking about, the biggest target there is the Russian economy. But the second biggest target there, and the one that's most worrying to Vladimir Putin, is bringing the impact of the conflict to the Russian people. Putin can control what's happening in the supply of fuel. And we're seeing in the Russian newspapers, they're blaming it on extra people going on holiday, on normal extra fuel required for agriculture at this time of the year. And there's very little blame going on to the fact that their oil refining capability is being heavily hit, as well as their storage capability and everything else. But at some stage, the Russian people are going to say enough is enough. And that's when Putin will start calling for further negotiations and a ceasefire, and start taking the proposals that have been given to him seriously. He's not at the moment. But we've got a way to play out yet on this. So let's keep watching. And our final point comes from the Earl of Anonymity. There's my teeth falling out as I try to say that. If Imperial Russia chooses war instead of peace in Eastern Europe, it would only justify the defence of independence and democracy, warranting full use of Article 5, universally speaking. Well, Russia has chosen war instead of peace in Eastern Europe by its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine, not being a member of NATO, Article 5 doesn't come in. Russia, I don't think, has got the ability nor the desire to attack Eastern European countries directly. The drone incursion is, as we've seen, Article 4 of NATO. Article 4 is effectively a collective get-together of all the NATO countries and a collective signing of a very stiff letter saying, we're dreadfully annoyed that you have done this, don't do it again. Article 5 is where it is deemed an attack on one is deemed as an attack on all and should see a collective support. Now, that support term does not necessarily mean that everyone's military is going to be thrown into it altogether. It is hoped that that is what the militaries believe, but it is, the word in it is actually support. And that support could come from, we're supporting you, right through to full military capability backing up. So Article 5 is the most powerful statement and activity that can come out of NATO, but it isn't what everyone thinks it is. And of course, historically, Article 5 has only ever been called once during NATO's existence. And that was, and we're recording this on 9/11, and that was because of 9/11, the Al-Qaeda attack on the World Trade Center and the start of the global war on terrorism. The United States called NATO Article 5, and they got a lot of support. It hasn't been called before that. It hasn't been called since. But we're in probably one of the most unstable times and dangerous times that we have seen. So that's all we have today from our question and answer. Thank you very much indeed for your points. If you want to get your points answered and you want to put them across, please sign up for Times Radio membership. And of course, you can get us today on your favourite podcast outlet by just searching for Times Radio Frontline. Thank you. Goodbye.